All right. Well, thanks again for the invite to come back. Like Marianne was saying, it's weeds are a big deal for the lake, and they have been for since I started in 2017. It's been an awful lot of fun coming and visiting with you guys each year to talk about kind of what our plans are, and to kind of go through what noxious weeds or invasive weeds are doing to your lake and how we can all help. And it's really, I thought it brought an extra level of stewardship to this lake and the control programs that we have going. So I'm really happy to get you here again to talk about kind of what's going on in the lake, what we've seen. When I was up there a couple of weeks ago, up on the water, kind of what I saw, and kind of what I'm getting prepared for this year for Hayden Lake, as it comes to weeds. So we'll go ahead and get started here. And the main things I wanted to go over was just a little bit of a recap of what happened last year, and then jump right into the big question, which is the curlyleaf pondweed that's in the north arm of the lake that we've been working. We put a lot of money and a lot of time and effort into that north arm and the control of the curlyleaf pondweed. And then I'll follow and wrap up with just a little bit of information on some treatment plans and kind of treatment and survey plans going forward into 2022. So with that, I kind of threw everything on here because I figured it's beneficial for you guys to know not only what's happening in Hayden, but I wanted to kind of show how it fits in with a lot of the other pieces of the puzzle, which is control. I'm not going to go over all the amounts, but you can see that the two species that we treated last year in Hayden Lake were for Eurasian water milfoil for 44.73 acres. And then
Jeremy, if I can, I apologize for interrupting you. We are not seeing your presentation. We're just seeing you.
No,
Oh,
I'm seeing it,
Oh,
Marianne.
you are.
Oh, yeah.
I'm missing out, but that's okay. I apologize. Keep going.
okay, I'm sorry. If there's anything else like that, please stop me. I'd never feel bad for interrupting me. I've got 3 kids. I'm used to it, so don't feel bad. But when it comes down to it, the biggest treatment area that we did on Hayden Lake was for curlyleaf pondweed, and that kind of story for the last 3 years about that 296 acres that we were treating in the North Arm for curlyleaf pondweed. This year again, or last year again, it was Clean Lakes Inc. They're still our contractor and will be for the remaining 3 years, since we have them on a 5-year reciprocal contract that renews each year, until at the end of that 5-year term, then it'll go to rebid again. But for now, Clean Lakes is still our go-to contractor for herbicide application, and will be again this year. For our diver-assisted suction harvesting, or DASH aquatic treatments, these are the diver dredge going down and controlling the weeds that way by hand. They do a lot of work for us. There was a mechanical treatment in the Gem Shores area of Hayden Lake, where the divers were going down next to that public water intake to make sure that the Eurasian water milfoil was being controlled in that area. Just as a recap for where those all are on the lake, the bright green polygons are the ones that were chemically treated. And then the little pink one on the map on the right is where the divers were tasked with performing that diver operation on the Eurasian water milfoil. So both of those occurred last year. And then last year and again this year, we do have our annual aquatics treatment plan page up on our website at Invasive Species of Idaho. It's one of the top options that when you select the menu for aquatic treatment plans. It's right up there, so you can click on it, get that information easily and accessible. We also have our SOP, how we do all of our surveys, as well as our dashboard that kind of keeps a running tab of where we've been, what we've been finding, average depths, and all that kind of fun information to be able to see and track where ISDA is and how many water bodies we're visiting in a year. So that is up and live as of today. Those are up and running. And then as we get more aquatic treatment plans going, we'll update that map regularly, especially as we kick off our season, which is kicking off sooner than you think. We've already done a few surveys up there. Like I said, we were up there a couple of weeks ago. So the big question that we have as we come up is talking about curlyleaf pondweed. Now, I shared these slides a few years ago when we first started getting into it about curlyleaf pondweed in the north arm of Hayden Lake, and what was the methodology behind our treatment plans. And so I just want to kind of review a little bit about curlyleaf pondweed, and kind of how its biology, how it grows, how it reproduces. It is an annual species, so it germinates in the fall, and then as soon as thaw happens just after winter, it will start to grow. So it's the first thing that pops up in the spring, and then by late spring, early summer, it's putting on turions, or those little reproductive parts of the plant, and then disseminating those into the benthic soils, and then the plant will desiccate then in mid to late summer, and then that all starts over again in the fall. And what I kind of depicted in this picture is that growth pattern. And then in the seed bank and all those little white dots on the bottom, that's all the seeds that are in the bottom of the lake and waiting to germinate the next crop of annual curlyleaf pondweed. So the methodology behind it, we're going as we're trying to target our treatment to try to have the most impact, which is in that early spring period before turion onset, so we can stop the spread of curlyleaf pondweed by reducing the amount of turions that this plant is able to produce, and start reducing what's in the seed bank or in those benthic soils as holdover seeds, if you will, to then germinate the next crop. So what we expected is when we started doing these treatments was year one was kind of going to be our biggest year. And then as we continually treat this area, we start reducing that seed bank and getting a lower and lower count of turions or reproductive parts of that plant from year after year. And after treating for 3 years, it's looking like it's on track. What we wanted to do when we first started this was have a way to be able to track our success and show our success. So we designed a simple monitoring grid to be able to send down a Ponar dredge that you can see in this picture in the lower right. If you've been to any of my previous presentations about this, you've seen this picture, you've heard this information, but it's always kind of beneficial to know. We started in the fall of 2019 after our first treatment in the spring of 2019, start collecting that turion data and by doing benthic Ponar grabs. The main thing we're looking for is these turions that are pictured here on the left, and then we use a grid of 30 points that you can see on the right that we would visit on an annual basis to start surmising where the turions are, what we're seeing, how things are looking, and be able to start saying, is our treatment working, yes or no? And be able to answer that pivotal question, then show through the data that we collect based on the treatments that we are performing. So in 2019, this was the picture. This is kind of what it was looking like. We had a very, very high centric location of densities in that upper area near Sportsman's Park, with the turions kind of being evenly spread throughout the remainder of the application area. Now, it is a bit skewed, especially as you start looking at, I believe that's Bob's Bay, am I right? The far up left corner, and then you have the Sportsman's Park area back behind, because we weren't able to get as many grabs just due to lower water levels at that time, and high density of weeds, matting and growth. So we weren't able to, Kim in the boat was not able to navigate that area as safely. So we said, oh, that's okay, we'll skip those points for this year. Then moving on to 2020, when we repeated that study, we noticed kind of a shift. There's still that red hot area near that Sportsman's area, was really where the highest densities of turions were in that location. But we started noticing some differences in the turions in the production. They weren't the big, vibrant turions. They were starting to get a little bit smaller. We took some good pictures of the differences in sizes, and we just kind of started noticing things, but we still noticed there was still some viable turions that were still in the soils and that we were able to recover. The biggest noticeable difference was in that kind of change that occurred that we saw with last year's study, in that we're starting to see that heat map reduce. There's not as many of bright, vibrant, hot red spots. We're starting to see that reduction in where they're at. What was also should be noted in this is the amount of native plants that were available at the time of that were present at the time of our survey in the late fall was a lot. There was a lot of native plants that were in the water, in some cases impeding the ability for the Ponar dredge to even get to the bottom and make a full grab of those benthic soils just because of the high numbers of those. And that's a good thing. Any anybody will tell you the more biodiversity that you have in an environment, the better it is, the more it does to help keep out invasive plants because you have healthy native population. So we really were able to see that last year. And so then we started asking the question, well, when do we get to a level that we're comfortable with for this application to start saying what's really available, for treatment wise? Does it make sense to go in there and introduce a chemical in an environment when there's far fewer target plant species than what we want to hit, and we want to let those natives not be impacted and continue to grow, because a lot of those natives are also in the same family. They're a potamogeton, they're a pondweed. So we don't want to impact those beneficial natives if they're going to help continue to outcompete the invasive plant. That's what we want. We want that biodiversity, and we don't want to impact it by putting an unnecessary amount of chemical in a water body. So when we came up there on April 22nd to come look at what was going on in the Hayden Lake area, this is another map that we made based off that data, and this map is a skewed map of what vegetation was present. Now, you'll notice the scale bar on the left goes from a light color all the way up to a very, very dark red color. There is no dark red areas in this because, and I'll overlay it with the data here that shows just where these plants were based on that same 30-point grid that we've been doing for the Turion study. When we went back over this, we did see plants, but however, they were single plants. They were not rakes full of curlyleaf pondweed. It was a single plant here, a single plant there. They were still within that kind of that normal area that we've been seeing curlyleaf pondweed in its highest numbers, but they were easily outnumbered by the native big leaf pondweed, coon's tail, Elodea, Richardson's pondweed. There was a lot of native plants in that rake that we had to kind of sift through to even find the curlyleaf pondweed. So it's a very, very good return on the treatments that we've been doing. So we made the decision in the call based on this information that we're saying we're not going to repeat this 296-acre chemical treatment on curlyleaf pondweed this spring. So we won't be attacking the North Arm this spring with chemicals, so you won't be getting a notice this year for a curlyleaf pondweed treatment. However, we also did notice when we were going around in this area that there is Eurasian water milfoil present. So it will be an area that we survey once the Eurasian water milfoil starts to show its current year's growth, which we were expecting to be in about June, to start seeing that full growth of Eurasian water milfoil in the lake. And we'll conduct a survey through the North Arm and then assign the treatment area based on that to start working towards removing the Eurasian water milfoil, which I think you will notice more of this year. And I don't think anybody will really notice the curlyleaf pondweed just because of how few and far between those plants really are. And each one of these throws, when we have one plant on there listed, there was two rake tosses for each of those throws. So only get one plant per was pretty rare to pull in a curlyleaf pondweed. So we've had a lot of success with this. So that is curlyleaf pondweed in a nutshell for this year. So we'll be revisiting for Eurasian water milfoil later, and I'll go over that here in a little bit more, but just wanted to share that data with you. One species I did want to kind of get all of you aware of, this species is not found in Idaho, but it's always good that the more eyes you have looking for the species that are not here in Idaho, that have the potential to spread to Idaho, the better. This was just added to our list this year. It's starry stonewort. It's actually a macroalgae. It's not a typical vascular plant, but it has this little star-shaped bulb that you can see in the upper right here, that it spreads really easily and likes to get trapped between boats and bunks as boats are moving back and forth across. And it's having a very, very similar spread pattern. And I'm sure all of you are aware of the quagga and zebra mussel spread that we're all concerned with, and we're all trying to fight to keep those things from coming into Idaho. This one's kind of showing that same track record, so we wanted to get on the list to try and help prevent it from getting into Idaho. So as you have visitors and things of that nature, it's always one to keep an eye out for. The biggest telltale thing is that white bulbil that you can see, it's about the size of a grain of rice. It's really small, and it would be trapped in something like a bunk or something like that. Or if you see a macroalgae growing in the lake that has little white stars attached to it, that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. But as you can see in this distribution map, it is in the Great Lakes area and starting to spread west. So we'll just kind of keep our eye on this and on all the boats that we have that come from that side of the U.S. coming into Idaho through our boat check stations. It's just kind of one of those things that we're keeping our eye out for. I thought you guys, as stewards of the lake, it would be a good idea to keep an eye out for an additional species to keep it out of your lake. We do have other macroalgae that are in Hayden Lake. Like you see your caras and things like that you'll see around that are, again, an algae. They look like a plant, but they're actually an algae. But you can see the starry stonewort on the left is a little bit more stringy. It's not as compact as the other caras that you're used to seeing. And then again, it'll have those small white bulbils that will stand out at each of the axial nodes on those plants. Okay, so here's the next question. I know it's burning in all your minds. What's next? We will be continuing to do more surveys. I have our map of Hayden Lake. We will be, again, doing a full littoral survey. That means all the growing areas within the Hayden Lake that we've done in the past years, where we go around and survey the entire lake, whether it's Kim and her crew from North Idaho, or if it's a part of our blitz, where we bring all the hands on deck from across the state up to visit that area. We'll be going through and visiting it and getting it surveyed. We're also going to still continue to kind of monitor that curlyleaf pondweed because we don't want it escaping again. So we'll continue to evaluate that throughout the year and for the years to come to make sure it doesn't have a resurgence, because that would then merit an additional treatment happening and occurring. So one thing I did want to point out to you guys this year that's been kind of a fun thing to be tracking over time is the reduction in the amount of herbicide that we've been using in water bodies. I know it's always a big concern whenever you start talking about a water body where people live, recreate, drink the water, all of that, to be able to start showing that we're having a reduced amount of herbicide introduction into those water bodies, and it's starting to trend downward as we start to have a little bit more proactive control of our species that we're trying to target and come up with a little bit more of a programmatic approach to each of them and trying to reduce their presence while maintaining a healthy lake environment by keeping those invasive species out. So we've been trending very well in Hayden Lake, which is right at the front of the graph, showing that we were using less and less chemical acres over time. And I'm expecting to kind of see that same trend this year, especially with the use of the product that we've been using on the Eurasian water milfoil. And just to kind of let you know what our priority assignments are for aquatic surveys for this year. This is the same message I've given to our staff. It's kind of the same approach we've had for a couple of years. Is obviously if we get any state reports of EDRR species, it's gonna be all hands on deck for those species first. And then for any pre-treatment surveys or treatments by contractors, those pre-treatment surveys come next. So Hayden Lake is kind of an ongoing thing as we keep continuing to make moves on the Eurasian water milfoil within Hayden Lake. And then we will continue on from there to other high priority water bodies with listed known species, and then any low priorities of species that we don't know if there's any invasives in them. So what that means for you guys is we've already conducted our March, April Hayden Lake curlyleaf pondweed pre-treatment, and that's where we decided not to treat for curlyleaf this year. So that's been done. The next step is coming up in the summer, and that will be between June and July, kind of watching the weather, kind of watching those plants as they develop, making sure there's enough there that we can detect them with our survey efforts. We will then be on the water for Hayden Lake, doing that through June, with the intent of treatments taking place in July. We will not be treating over the 4th of July weekend, but probably most likely thereafter. So that's when I'd be expecting to see announcements up on our website, seeing those water rights notices in the mail coming to you guys, letting you know where our treatment locations are taking place. And then that's kind of where then we'll continue on with our other water bodies from there. So, and then we'll be again in October. We have it slated to be coming up for that curlyleaf pondweed in that fall. Take a look at what's coming up for the fall, repeating that curlyleaf pondweed turion survey, and looking and kind of evaluating to see where we're going to be going from there with curlyleaf. So with that, that's all the information I have as far as noxious weed treatments go for your water body for this year. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I think that several of us were wondering if there was a positive effect with the low water levels at the beginning of the winter last year, and then the cold on the exposed weed beds. Was there any positive result in terms of lowering or killing off some of those weeds at all?
When I visited in April 22nd, the water had miraculously come up enough for us to be able to slip back into that back bend behind Sportsman's Park there. And you're right, the cold temperatures and the drawdown, there was no aquatic vegetation visible at the time. I know the water has just come up. Now it'll be kind of interesting to watch and see if we get, because we do know that freezing temperatures on exposed root crowns of Eurasian water milfoil does impact that plant. Now, was it enough for that far northern end was it exposed long enough? Was there, I also know that there was, I kind of laughed when I was up there, I saw some grass growth, actual monocot grass growth in that far north arm that was starting to die because now it had been flooded. So it's going to be a very interesting area to watch and see what comes back, because the slate's been cleared in that north arm.
Yeah.
So I don't know what impact it would have on any present turions for curly leaf pondweed.
Yeah.
But it'll be kind of one of those areas that we really want to kind of look at and watch as temperatures continue to warm, as the amount of daylight during the day increases, and we start more and more germination, kind of backfilling that now new and ready open parking lot for plant growth in that far north. But it'll be kind of something just interesting to keep an eye out. But that's a great question. We will be watching it.
So what if we do see something that we think is just massive curly leaf pondweed? Or what if we see the new invasive algae that you mentioned, starry stonewort, was that it? What if we see these things, or we think we see these things? What are we supposed to do?
Anytime you see something, and I think Kim's going to cover this in her presentation here in just a minute, but the most important thing is anytime you see something that just doesn't look right. My email's up here on the slide. You can email me a picture. If you give me a location, that's even better. And let us know what you're finding, what you're seeing. And we love getting that kind of information, because the more eyes out that are looking, the better. Because we get to see your lake in snapshots. We try to target those snapshots when it's most productive for us to be there, to be able to capture a species that we're after. But you guys get to see your lake year round, and your eyes are constantly on it. So if you see something that you haven't seen before, you're usually the ones that are going to see it first before we do, and we're just coming in at our intervals into the lake. So it never hurts to take a picture, record a point, a GPS location of where it's at, and then send that on to us, because then we can follow up with it and make sure it's either let you know what type of species it is, if it's something we need to address, and go forward from there.